G'day and welcome to the Grow a Small Business Podcast. I'm your host, Troy Truen. Each week, we speak with an owner who has grown a business with 5 to 30 team members to something bigger. Diving into their numbers and unearthing the pain they've experienced, we explore what they did to overcome each barrier and what they would do differently from day one. Let's get into it. Welcome everyone. Today I'm interviewing Eddie Brook from Byron Distillery in beautiful Byron Bay, which is about an 8-hour drive north of Sydney here in Australia. Thanks for your time today, Ed.
Thanks, Troy. Thanks for having me.
Let's start with how we know each other. Your mum, Pam, I had her on the cast a few months ago now, but I actually met your parents, Pam and Martin, at Ratho Farm here in Tasmania, about an hour out of Hobart at a whiskey week event 5 or 6 years ago. It was the first one, I think. They came down for it. Had a great time. We were playing golf up there at Ratho that weekend. Thankfully, took a lot of whiskey out with us because knowing by the end of the round of golf. So we're putting white balls on, snow-dusted greens. Yeah, it was quite an interesting trek.
No, I actually remember them coming back from that, telling the stories. I think there was about two hip flasks for every person playing golf, but yes. That was the year either of or the year before we started the distillery, and they came down. I think it was the Whiskey Week in Tasmania, which was great. But yeah, that was
just before you started, August 2016, I think it was.
Yeah, there we go. Just before we started. So I've never seen the amount of whiskey Mum had coming back in her luggage. I think it cost her a bit of excess baggage, but they had a great time. And again, just such a good things like that to increase the network and meet people as we were heading into it.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, your mum Pam was on episode 46 back in October 2020. That's right, talking about the other business you have there.
Yeah.
Great. So tell our audience a bit about your business, Byron Distillery, what it does and how it makes money.
Yeah, so Byron Distillery, we started in 2016. We distilled our first bottle in the first week of November and sold our first bottle in the last week of December. So we just snuck in. Yep. So we've been going for around sort of that 4 or 5 year mark. So our products that we produce are a range of brookies. So started with our signature dry gin, moved into Davidson Plum infused, we call our brookies Byron Slow Gin, and then a Mac liqueur. And then as we've expanded and, we love creating and working on new products and projects. So we've been adding on doing some limited release. But for the last 2 years, we've sort of undertaken our whiskey project, which has been a decent amount of investment for us in the background. So let's say we used to make a lot more money before we started making a lot of whiskey, but
it's all sitting in those casks.
That's it. But yeah, so for us, we distribute primarily in Australia. 98% of what we do in terms of revenue is domestic. And yeah, we've got our team around Australia knocking on doors and bars and selling through wholesalers. But we're opening up a few of those export markets, and that's kind of a bit of our plan of where we're hoping to go.
Yeah, great. And so you mentioned a Mac liqueur. I assume that's a macadamia liqueur because you're a massive macadamia farm up there, haven't you?
Yeah, we do. So macadamias are in our blood. Where I'm sitting here and where our distillery is on our farm. So we've been regenerating rainforest as long as I can remember, actually, before I was even a thought. And our farm, we do regeneration of rainforest, but a fully functioning macadamia farm of 98 acres. So Brook Farm, our first business that I'll just touch on, that was created by Mum and Dad. And the pure intent to that was to value add to the macadamia. Macadamia is our most well-known bush food in Australia, commercialized and whatnot, also gone into export markets and taken the world by storm. But in Australia, as farmers, we were growing it, just, either coating it in chocolate or just roasting it and shipping it overseas in bulk. And we wanted to celebrate that. So creating and using what we have and showcasing our backyard is kind of a value when you look at what the products we produce, say between Brook Farm, but also the distillery, where they kind of, work as a source of inspiration. So for the macadamia, the Mac liqueur, we use macadamias here from our farm in Northern Rivers and hand roast them, and also use a native wattle seed. So it's takes a 3-4 month process, but the flavor is just incredible. We got a lot of education to do on that, because when you say macadamia liqueur, they're like, that sounds great. What the hell do I do with that?
Terrible. Yeah.
But we just say, look, if you've had Frangelico,
Yep.
you know where this product is kind of heading. So it's been a really, especially in export markets, it's created a fair bit of interest, because there's just not a lot of products out there.
Yeah, great. And can you talk to like where you're focusing on export wise?
Yeah, for sure. So we started pretty early on in the UK, been doing pretty well over there. We've got one of our co-founders and owners, Jim McEwen from Scotland. He lived his life on Islay. In the world of distilling, globally, he's a bit of a legend.
He's an absolute legend. I had lunch with Jim when I was at Lark when he came down.
Yeah.
Lovely bloke. Yeah, I think he's 52 or 53 years in the industry, and he's been an international judge for 20 or 30 years. Phenomenal legend in the industry.
I actually probably met you on that lunch, because I orchestrated that tour. And so I remember when we went through Lark in particular. So
that's right. We went to Frogmore across the road from the distillery and had lunch.
That's the one. Yeah. They smelled like these lamb lollipops or something like that.
Yeah, that's right.
Funny how I remember the food.
Yeah.
But yeah, so with Jim, he has such a global impact, but in particular in the UK where he's from, he's got lots of connections, and we're able to, he does some ambassador work still there for us now. So when we went to the UK early on, that was one of our first markets, and we've been growing that steadily. We're in Malaysia at the moment, and then we're looking at a few other markets, in particular New Zealand, Japan, eyes on the United States. Obviously, you've got to have a significant amount of, if you're walking in there, you've got to have a decent checkbook to get your brand in there, or to get your brand.
Yeah, it's really complex. The US, it's like 50 different countries, because all the states' laws are different, prohibition, ex-prohibition, blah, blah, blah. Yeah, it's annoying.
So that's for us the next stage of our business. When you look at in Australia, for those listening that don't know much about the spirit industry, and I'm sure where you've had multiple guests on here and yourself, but for every bottle we sell, we get revenue from it, but in that same transaction, there's also money goes straight out the door. And with our dry gin, our signature, we sell that wholesale on average for $51, and we're giving $27 back, so over 50%. So there's a much bigger cash outflow. So there's a real great opportunity in terms of minimizing that cash outflow from running a business. That's a real benefit for export, but it's also just managing that risk and bringing us into a bit of more of a global setting. So our goal is to end up around that 30-40% export mark, but that's going to take some time, but it's always good to set a goal and a direction in place.
That's right. And just back on Jim McEwen, just for the audience that is in the distilling space. So he rebooted the Brook beautiful distillery and whiskey that they made. There's a great documentary or a movie on that, I think, that I watched a while ago. And at the same time, he also launched the Botanist, the gin, under Brook.
Yeah. So absolute legend of industry. Before that, he was master distiller at Bowmore, then to Brook, brought that back to life. And also outside of that, the work he has done from an ambassador point of view to put Scotch whiskey and whiskey on the map has just been incredible. But from a production and innovation side of things, he's been pushing boundaries his whole life. Back when sherry cask at one point in time was some really new, innovative stuff, and this guy from Islay was putting whiskey into these sherry casks and then bringing that into wine cask maturation. And at a time in Scotland, the industry is just so drenched, and it's a really positive thing, but drenched in tradition. Those changes take time, and you need a few mavericks like Jim and what he did with Octomore and with bringing the world's most peated whiskey to life. He's always been a man that wants to take whiskey where no whiskey's ever gone before, and he's a pretty inspirational character. And I suppose to learn from him, and you know, we'll talk a bit later about mentors, but to have someone like that has just been such an incredible experience. But you know, I think that's really helped us drive the business and grow us to where we want to go. You know, to always challenge yourself and, you know, shoot for the moon, go where no spirit's gone before, and do something different.
Yeah. And the other great thing about Jim's boldness and innovation, I think, bears out in the brand of Brook Distillery. The massive pivot they did was very risky, went totally against the grain. If you look at any Scotch brand, so for the audience that aren't in the distilling game, like champagne, you can't call Scotch whiskey unless it's made in Scotland. If it's outside of Scotland, it's called just whiskey. So for a Scotch whiskey to have such a controversial modern kind of twist on a brand, they really pushed the envelope there as well. So he'd be a great mentor to be having.
And I think as for collectors, Jim was their biggest headache or nightmare, because there was a period in Brook Laddies that they were known as Mavericks, and they were so proud about it that every time there was a new opportunity, you know, there was a yellow submarine, you know, washed up on Isla, and they did a release about it. And it seemed there was, for a period back when Brook Laddie was getting reborn, when Jim had the keys to the ship, you know, they were creating such incredible stuff. And the team, that innovative team culture that came around from Jim being really at the forefront of driving that, it was pretty incredible. And you look at that as a case study to build culture of innovation. You know, you just stick Jim at the forefront and let it go.
So 2 final questions then on starting out. So how old were you in 2016 when you started? And secondly, what sparked the idea to start a distillery, basically?
Geez, what am I now? 32 now. So, yes, I was, 26, 27 when I started. So for us, we've always been, I grew up in a family business. As long as I can remember, I think when I was 12 years old, our family, we'd go to the markets on the weekend and we'd sell Brook Farm, our product. During the week, we'd bake it at home. Will and I'd come back home from school. We'd have to put labels on bags. You know, I think our first bedroom in Byron was doubled as the warehouse. You know, we had to climb through the boxes to get to it. But that for us wasn't a business or anything. That was family. So I was been very fortunate to grow up in a family business setting and environment. And I look to a lot of the skill sets that say I bring to the business, and how we manage the team, and how we as a family cohort sort of manage both businesses. And those values are really just ingrained into us. So I was really fortunate from that side of things. But I'll keep the story short-ish. Grew up in the food industry. That fell into, when I was 18, fell into the spirit industry, as where everyone starts as a bartender. You got to hone your skills and pour a beer before you can do anything else. And I quickly fell in love and found my creative output in the world of cocktail, bars, mixology, whatever label we want to call it. And I really just found that creative output and working with all these different spirits. And that led me working with different incredible bars, and then became an ambassador for spirits, you know, Brook Laddie and the Botanist Gin. I was going around to events and bartenders and training them. And that led me to a career, a sales and marketing career with a business called South Trade International. And they were importer and distributor for some really great products, some really more like, you know, they had from a real mix, you know, from Green Fairy absinthe, you know, very party and all of this, to Brook Laddie and, you know, Pappy Van Winkle and Buffalo Trace in between, Heyman's Gin. So
Starwood as well. They were an early backer of Starwood, weren't they?
Yeah.
I had David Vitale on the cast as well, yeah.
I first met David Vitale when I came to Sydney for my interview, and he was sitting there the same day. They were talking about distribution, and he was talking about, it was the early stage. I don't think they'd even started to distill, but one of the guys actually, I think they had a small accident, and, you know, one of the guys that was meant to be distilling had broken his arm and his leg as well. And it was quite funny, but I've known David since the start, and to be a part of launching Starwood in the market of Australia was brilliant.
Yeah.
And to see where that brand has gone, and they I truly believe they've grown the category of what Australian whiskey is to the customer.
Yeah.
Accessibility, but the quality is just incredible, and the uniqueness. To say, hey, we're not being a Scotch whiskey, we're not going to be a smoky whiskey from Islay or an imitator. This is us. This is our DNA. This is our spirit, and they built that so well. So that gave me my sort of career and cut my teeth there. And that led me to being able to put on a tour for the great Jim McEwen. Now, I was just beside myself with excitement and with the opportunity. And it was from that tour, we got to know each other quite well as friends. And there was these moments of creativity. We'd sit on planes together, and he'd asked me where I'm from and my family and what we do. I told him how passionate we were about regeneration, our community, and giving back to the land.
Which is very core to where he's from, Islay as well, isn't it?
Absolutely. Community is everything. You look at the story of Brook Laddie. When I used to teach people about Brook Laddie, when I got up, to be honest, at that time, I didn't know a thing really about the spirit or anything. But what I got to talk to people about was the community and how that business has affected the community. They're employing disabled people in the bottling hall. They're employing farmers. They're encouraging them back to growing barley. There's money going back to people's pockets. It's going to the local schools and community halls. That's what I got up and talked about. And for me, that connection to community is so strong. So we just had this instant bond. And I think it was really those values connecting. And I was telling him about this native produce. And, I was lucky enough growing up here on the farm. Native Indigenous produce is just how I've been brought up, and really played around and created a lot of different flavors as a young kid. And this idea just bubbled up, and he literally turned to me on one flight and he said, Eddie, we were meant to meet and we're going to start a distillery.
Wow.
After that moment, it wasn't too much more convincing to the folks. For us as a family business, we knew we were going to start some new ventures, and we had a few, you have your ideas shelf, a few different projects and businesses, and none really just quite fit with, a few different sort of parameters. And I remember I just called them up, and they flew to Tasmania on the last leg of Jim's tour. And that was the start of Cape Byron Distillery.
Great. And that would have been 2015, I think. We had the lunch.
It was, yeah. Right. So we moved quick.
Yeah, so
got a good idea.
A bit over a year later, you've launched. That's fantastic. Yeah. And do you have some key numbers you can share to illustrate the growth of the business over the last
Yeah, for sure. So in the world of spirits, we normally sort of talk off case sales. Yeah. And when we talk off case sales, that's kind of an international measure. So a case is 6 bottles of gin. So in 1819, the previous year, 1718, it was me driving around wherever I could to get a sale and building the brand especially in the on-premise. That was my background, was in the on-premise and the bar communities. So in 1819, we did just shy of 10,000 physical cases. Yep. And then up to 17,000 last financial year, and on track to do just over 24 this year. So, looking at that sort of 80% growth, and then from last year about, that sort of 45, 50% growth. So
right. Yeah.
We're really strong. And for us, that's going to be tracking at least at that 40% growth for a period of time.
Yep.
But yeah, really comfortable with that. But it's been a lot of investment in growing our team to get it to there. But just so ecstatic with the results we've achieved.
Yeah, that's phenomenal. And you've got an internal sales team, so you haven't gone with a distributor. It's just you guys hand selling basically. Yeah.
Yeah. So there's a couple of different ways to do that. Today, if Joe Blogg starts a distillery, you got a few different routes to market. One is you can go through a distributor, you sell to them, and then they have a team they go around to. Now, me being on the other side of you're working for a distributor.
Yeah, I was going to ask this. Yeah.
I, as a brand manager, had the weekly, weekly battle of it's all about getting your brand the time.
Yeah.
In that meeting and that opportunity. Now, a distributor's business model is to look after, represent a number of brands and to sell those products within. Now, there's a lot of different brands and a lot of different products. So depending on where your product sits, it doesn't get a lot of airtime in a sales meeting or in a pitch or conversation. So for us, what we were doing is our business, what we're really passionate about, and the reason we exist is our kind of environmental purpose. And when we're telling that story and connecting that product and the uniqueness and the reason it exists, it just doesn't work for us going through a distributor model. So we made that investment, and and a bit of a core competency I had, which was building those sales teams and marketing that product. So we invested in our own people on the ground that were salespeople, if you want to call them, but they were also storytellers. They were doing education and training and doing events. And we supply mainly to wholesalers. So we sort of call it a direct wholesaler model, where we supply to wholesalers, and we have our teams all around Australia. We've got sort of 9 sales reps now around Australia on the ground doing those sales and the product accessible. So yeah.
So the sales reps then, do they do a bit of the brand ambassador work, or you have separate brand ambassadors as well?
No, they would do the work of what a brand ambassador would be. And it's funny, you talk to people, some people have different views on an ambassador. And I think, coming from the bartender world, sometimes an ambassador can be a glorified bartender. If you talk to a bartender, right, where do you want to grow your career? Brand ambassador's right up there. But from the brand's perspective, how accountable is that? Especially as a small business, when you're looking for a brand ambassador, at the end of the day, it's great if you're getting your product out there, but you also want to be seeing those results in themselves. So for us, when we talk about, and the people we brought on, we are always have been, and something we've been working more on is becoming a lot more we've always been culture focused. And in terms of when we hire people, even, it's that culture that has to ring true, because if our values and all of that stuff doesn't mix and blend together, and they don't love what we love, and the reason for why we're doing it, when they're at arm's length in, say, in Victoria, inland Victoria, getting a sale, they conveying not only just getting that sale, but the work of what an ambassador would do, because they're, giving that brand message and giving it in a way that they truly believe it.
Yep, great. Any other key numbers that illustrate the growth, like full-time equivalents from start to what you got now?
Yeah. We started with myself, the family dog, the parents, and Jim. It was, the thing is, from where we started, it was all hands on deck. We had so many great family friends that were assisting us the first bottling run. Even we started our business initially with a crowdfunding campaign to kick off. And the reason for us of doing that was first to get some dollars in the door, and what a way to start. I think we achieved, I think, 28,000 for that. And we were ecstatic. We hit our goal. But it also gave us a medium to tell our story and to connect our story and our purpose and our uniqueness with those customers, our first loyal customers. So yeah, it was all family members to begin with. And then, we've been growing steadily year on year. So, it sort of, for us, fluctuates slightly, but sits around that sort of 29 FTEs at the moment. And we're going to be growing that significantly over the next 18 months. Luckily, we were just talking earlier off interview just about a new grant that's come through in the local, a new rebate in the budget, which is going to have a great impact for us. An additional $250,000 a year we can put directly into our business.
Hiring more people.
Hiring more people, buying new things, investing in infrastructure and capital upgrades, because we're just at this tipping point and pinch point now that we literally don't have any room to grow. I'm actually in the only meeting space that is quiet, and we don't have one of those at the distillery, because we're almost on top of each other, which is a good thing in many ways.
Yeah. And I was going to ask, I assume you got a cellar door there as well? Yep, great. So pre-COVID, was that quite busy? Quite popular? Byron Bay is beautiful for those what do you get? 1.5 million visitors a year, I think, per annum to
Yeah.
Byron Bay. It's quite not a big town. I mean, I know there's a lot of international celebrities that live there, like Thor and
Yeah.
what's his name? There's a lot of celebrities moving there at the moment. But yeah, it's a very popular tourist place, isn't it?
Yeah, for sure. And we're so fortunate to be a part, obviously we grew up here, our business, and to start a new business here. And, it's close to 2 million in visitors we get through the town. Now, COVID has changed the style of visitor and the dollar that's coming into town in particular. But before that, part of our region, you come to Byron Bay, you see the lighthouse, the town itself is stunning. But the gems in my mind is outside of the town itself. It's Northern Rivers as a region. You've got beautiful places like Bangalow and Eltham and Mullumbimby and Brunswick Heads. And when you extend out, there is so much incredible food and drink offering outside of that, from producers, we've got coffee roasters and cheese makers, very similar, I suppose, in Tasmania, you've got this, and you've done as a body have done so well communicating that food and drink offering. And that's where we've been working on about that food and drink tourism, that trail.
Well, it's huge up there. I mean, Stone and Wood are based around Byron Bay, and they've just moved to a site where they can go up to 40 million litres a year and then double if they need to. And I've heard, more than half their sales of beer is usually within 3-hour drive of Byron Bay. That's how popular they've made that area.
Yeah, pretty much we're very fortunate. We've known Stone and Wood, the founders, from day one, actually, when they held their first board meeting.
Pam told me this.
Yeah, they were in Banksia Drive, and we have our bakehouse there, and they borrowed our boardroom at Brook Farm, and there was obviously strong trade. It was for a case of beer back then. It's still a very worthwhile currency, beer and
it is.
But we have been so fortunate, and to have them in our region, and to see the growth of their business. And we're so fortunate. We do a lot of work together with them. They actually produce whiskey wort or wash for us to make our whiskey. But everything they do as a business, we sort of look to, and we take a lot of our strategy from what they do to some respect. And what they did so well, they talk about their backyard. And when they created, and with the boom in distilleries in Australia, it's so important to own your backyard.
Providence.
Make that place, so when you look, and like you said, the majority of their beer is still sold from 3 hours. If you looked at a map and you looked at Northern Rivers, it is like the red hot epicenter. And that's for us what we invest a lot of our time and energy into growing our brand here, because it's one thing if we can get you through the distillery, but if you go to a bar, a venue, and the bartenders are talking about it, and we work on really ingraining ourselves in the community, and it's important to do that. And when you talk about it, it sounds like a marketing position, but for us growing up we would not exist without our community, and we want to have a positive impact to our community environment as a whole. So those sort of go hand in hand. But to have the cellar door here from the start as that unique experience, and we're lucky enough, Friday, Saturday, Sunday, we bring people through for rainforest and distillery tours and give them something unique. And when they walk out of, when you have that drinking a gin and tonic in the rainforest, and you're picking a leaf of aniseed myrtle off the tree, you see this like inner child awaken within them. To connect people back to where their food and drink comes from and give them that experience, it is a real powerful tool.
Yeah, great. Did you find much of a hit? Obviously, with the cellar door, it had been closed for a while with COVID, but have you guys found you've been able to pick up with a lot of domestic travel and tourism, I guess, now?
Yeah, so Byron Bay, we were, COVID hit us like a ton of bricks, like a lot of businesses. We went from, at that point, around 55% of our sales was in the on-premise. Still, we were very on-premise heavy as a company. On-premise, for those, that's bars, restaurants, cafes, pubs, and that stopped overnight. And you know, we're getting messages, and like everyone, that only businesses that are essential can continue to trade. And I don't know about you, but, you know, I'd like to think that gin makers are essential to the country.
They are, yes.
However, I was thinking in that same breath that maybe that wasn't going to be the case. So we quickly transitioned into sanitizer, and we had from a 9-day from product inception to product in market, we had 9 days and that product was out.
Right. Yeah.
Which is pretty great. And purely for us, it was plugging the gap for our local community here. Some went up to Brisbane and a few other places, but it was primarily Northern Rivers. But you're, like you said, you know, with all other hospitality venues, we were one of those as a cellar door. We stopped that immediately, and to not be able to have that as such a strong marketing brand advocacy asset, it was, you know, it was definitely a challenge. But we were able, you know, what was fortunate through our sanitizer, all of our cellar door tour guides became, you know, online store packers for sanitizer and delivery drivers. So we were really fortunate that we actually kept everyone in work and actually brought in a few extra during it. So yeah, but now that's come back on board. We're welcoming people with open arms, and they are flocking to Byron at the moment. Yeah, we're really fortunate to be in such a strong tourism area.
Yeah, I sit on a couple of boards, the Hobart Brewing Company here in Tasmania, the second biggest craft brewer in Tassie, and a distillery in the Swan Valley, Western Australia, just outside of Perth. And we were blown away with, from mid last year when everything started opening up again here in Australia, you could obviously travel within your own state, not necessarily around Australia, but the locals coming out and supporting businesses. You know, our numbers were really surprising. We were getting back up to close to where we were pre-COVID because the locals were coming out and supporting us.
Yeah, and we saw that shift in retail as well. You know, I don't think it was quite panic buying of gin like it was toilet paper, but you know, that where people would have that consumption at an on-premise in a bar, they'd have their cocktail or whatever. That trend was shifting towards, you know, that at-home bartender and cocktail. So people were trading up, which was great. We saw that, but you know, to that, the support from the community and the support for people to purchase local was just brilliant. And I think I don't think it got, you know, kind of the credit that it deserved, because that was such an important piece that kept so many businesses cash flow, you know, cash coming into their business during the period.
All right, just to close out the growth numbers. So the FTE, would you estimate when you started, 2 or 3 of you?
Yeah, one. I was the only employee technically.
Yep. And when was the moment you felt like you'd succeeded?
I think it's sort of twofold. You know, when first, I vividly remember it like it was yesterday when we distilled our first batch of our dry gin. There is so much work, time, energy, money gone into this project, and, you know, to bring it to life. And it only existed if the product was going to be good. Now, like anything, you know, you're venturing into the night, you know, into the mist, and not knowing what's going to part, you know, when you part through the clouds, what's it going to look like? Is it going to be a shitstorm, or is it going to be a beautiful rainbow? Now, obviously with Jim and the work we've done on building and creating the recipe, all the product development, but at that moment when we first bottled and we distilled and bottled our product, and I was just blown away. And we actually very early on, we got rewarded with a gold medal from San Francisco Spirit Competition. And to that product to be judged blind on something we'd created, our first product, we were just ecstatic. And it was at that point I knew, hey, we've got a really bright future here. But just recently we had our national conference, and sitting there looking around the room, and we had 34 people in the room. It was just, you have these moments, and I think it's really important to make sure you take your time to enjoy, to enjoy those moments, but how important they are. And to have 34 people part of the business sitting around was a pretty powerful moment. So yeah, I'd say especially that team, and knowing we can produce a pretty good product was a good thing.
Well, that's amazing, Eddie. The San Francisco Spirits Award is pretty much the #1 awards for the white spirits particularly. You got the whiskey awards in London. The London is more for whiskey, but San Francisco, that's a phenomenal achievement. So congratulations.
Thank you.
And what does success look like to you?
Success for me is a sustainable business, and sustainable being in many ways in terms of our impact to the environment. We do, it's very easy to pull growth levers, and you can grow faster than lose sort of track of your values and who we are and our purpose. So success for me is growing a sustainable business, and that kind of sustainable running across a few of those points.
Number one thing you'd recommend to marketing a fast-growing business?
Storytelling.
Yep.
Become a storyteller and don't undervalue the power of storytelling. For us, we knew for the first year and a half to 2 years, only investment in marketing that we did was events. So every opportunity I'd pop up, and I'd be at markets, I'd be at events, I'd be at, you name it, give me an opportunity, I'd turn up with a gin in a bar, and I'd tell people about, I'd get, liquid on lips, we'd call it, and telling our story. And that is something we try to now do on a much grander scale. But that focusing on storytelling, especially in a market now that is so competitive, you have to have that point of difference, or pick where you want that point of difference just to resonate, be it in your local area or whatnot. But yeah, storytelling would be the number one.
And you guys are working towards becoming a B Corp, which is quite big in America at the moment with USA, but it's growing traction here in Australia.
Yeah, definitely. So for those that don't know about B Corp, it's essentially a measure of sustainability in business, and your impact on environment, but also how you run your business from an ethical point of view. So there's many metrics, and it's not just one about, right, can I buy enough carbon credits to offset my carbon? Hey, let's put that on the label.
Yeah.
It's not that. It's really as a measure of your sustainability as a business and impact to community, environment, and your community being your workforce, but your local area. So for us, sustainability and environmental impact is just not even, it's greater than a core value. It's kind of the pillars in which we were brought up on, and the business, even the reason why it exists. So for us, going down B Corp, we've submitted our final piece now, and we've ticked the boxes to actually be awarded all the points for certification.
Yep.
But it's been a really great learning. I would very much recommend for any businesses that value sustainability to go through the process, even to start it out, because what it does, it make you won't be able to achieve this unless you can internally within the business measure your impact. And it's all about measure.
Yeah.
And so this idea of sustainability isn't, right, do you just tick a box? It's an ongoing journey. To say, hey, as a business, we're sustainable, we're doing sustainable things. We also want to be doing better sustainable things. We can measure what we're doing now, and this is what we're going to do to get better.
Yep.
That's for me the story of, in your business, what is sustainability? It's trying to be better and lower your impact, have a more positive, lower your impact to environment, more positive impact to community. And yeah, so it's been a really great process. So fingers crossed all goes well, but hopefully we can join that business or that global community of B Corp certified businesses. I think Applewood in Australia is, Brooklady in the UK, in Scotland is, but yeah, I'm not sure if there's many other distilleries. I'm sure during COVID there was like anything. There's been a big spike in a lot of activity, and I know within B Corp they've been inundated because a lot of businesses weren't able to trade, so they looked internally about what could they work on it, and there was a lot that started that process during it, which is great.
I know Flora and Fauna had Julie Mathers on, the founder of Flora and Fauna, the biggest vegan product website in the world. When I interviewed her about a year ago, I had to think about, 6 months ago, about 8,000 products, cruelty-free, animal-free, etc. And they literally just got bought today, actually, bought out. But they're a B Corp as well. And I remember I think that's one of the first guests how I came across the B Corp. I think it's a wonderful initiative. From memory, you've got to be going for at least a year, and your first submission, you've got to have at least 80 points. It's not out of 100. You can go up to 120, 30, 40, a whole lot of measures. I think I would encourage business owners to definitely look into it. What about funding the business growth? So you mentioned crowdfunding, any other investors or bank finance?
No. So one thing for us when we talk about being a family business, our exit strategy is to become generational. And, a lot of people, they'll say, no, look, there's always a price on, everyone's got their golden number. And for us, that's not our reason for being. It's quite a different mindset for us being a family organization and unit. So when we started the business, we were able to, through the sale of a piece of land, actually, that gave us the ability to get to sort of fund the initial infrastructure work done. And then all of our sort of a significant amount has been funded by the bank, looking at different facilities. A lot of anything we can asset finance, we'll take it and negotiate those rates.
Yeah, and staff don't want to stand still for too long, do they? They might be asset financed.
Exactly. We look at them like, are you a wall, a person? What are you? So for us in particular, we've been growing, and so the way I manage the business is very much about cash flow positive. So year 3, we turned a healthy profit, and since year 2, we've been cash flow positive.
Great.
And so that's been that was going to be the way that the business had to stand on its own 2 feet. And even with the investment in whiskey, our strategy is it's kind of like a wedge. We've got to have it generate enough cash flow to be able to invest into the production of whiskey. Whiskey's for us just the next chapter for us at the distillery. It's not a losing side of what we're doing or anything. But as it's, you think about production of whiskey, you start producing today, investment in, your labor, your raw ingredients, everything to do that, you can't sell it for a minimum 2 years. When that product, you're happy with it, it's more that sort of 3, 4, 5 year mark when you start seeing that revenue come in for
I was going to ask, how many years are you guys looking at aging for?
Unsure yet. So we're going to be doing a small release. At this stage, it's probably going to be about that 3 year mark. We've got whiskey now. I think we're filling our 250th barrel today in all full format casks. So we've been pretty busy here, but it's for us when we start to release it as well of the matured stock, it's only going to be a smaller percentage because we're going to be aging that for longer. But we were just blown away. I did a live tasting with Jim. He's a part of this. They did a second movie on his life called The Water of Life. And we did this global whiskey tasting, and we did it with a whiskey team or a whiskey club in Germany, and just as a sneak preview and a present, we drew a cask sample out, a bourbon cask sample, and the feedback, especially for Jim was just blown away with the flavor development already. But the way Jim talks, it's really important. It's like sending your children off to war. The way
pretty dramatic,
a bit dramatic, but Jim loves the drama, and it's important to that, and that's the thing for us. So unless we're really happy with where that spirit is, we're not going to be putting it to bottle.
So are you using quarter casks, 100 liters?
Or full format, also 200 liter bourbons.
Got it.
Predominantly going into bourbons. So a bit of a mix at the moment. It's predominantly Buffalo and Heaven Hill casks, and some we got the checkbook out for a few sherry casks.
God, so expensive, aren't they?
Oh God,
the mortgage.
I almost cried when I was processing that payment, but it's like investment, and this comes from, again, learning from Jim, and it's when Jim talks about whiskey transcends being just a product. It's not just a spirit. And that was some of the biggest learnings. And when Jim talks about whiskey, it transcends it being a product. And he talks about it that whiskey is the child, like a baby being born, and the cask is the mother.
Yeah.
Now, if that mother does not have energy to give and mature and develop and look after that child, and in that is right, we've got to make sure we have a strong investment policy in our barrel program to give it the best barrels, to give that spirit the best chance to be great.
Yeah. And if you were to start up today with plenty of funding, would you go into your industry?
I would. I'd probably need more funding than what I did back then. The landscape has changed a lot, and it takes a lot more to cut through, I think, this day and age. But yeah, I would. It's such an incredible industry, especially being based here in our community, and the impact that we have is so great in terms of, especially not so great. It's more about the feeling you get from having a positive impact is just incredible. But yeah, wouldn't change a thing. Maybe I would put whiskey down a bit earlier, but we wouldn't have had the cash back then, and we wouldn't have it now.
Yeah. And with the export, I assume you've looked at the EMDG, Export Marketing Development Grant. What about the export finance loan? Have you accessed that to help with your export?
No, we haven't done that one yet. But here at the distillery, we love a grant. We go for absolutely every grant there is possible, and we're getting better and better and better at writing those. Writing grants. We even then sometimes go external through grant writers.
Yeah.
We were lucky enough, so we got a grant for our new facilities from FIAL for assisting with the build, so about innovation and how the warehouses we're building. The concept is using, you walk into the rainforest on the hottest day of the year and it's cool. It's like nature's air conditioning, and vice versa. It's got this sort of thermal sort of cooling and warming effect to it. And we've pretty much just taken that and built that into a warehouse with how we're going to be doing it. So they got us a grant. So Jobs for Growth, we've just onboarded a few new from those. But the export, we do take advantage on, the export development. We haven't been spending too much though.
Yep.
And that's one thing we're kind of setting that aside to really maximize when we want to grow it.
Have you looked at the export finance loan? So they will lend you, the government will lend you money, say, for 6 months while your products are on the water and until you get paid.
I haven't. I think I've looked at that one, but I haven't probably in detail, because that sounds like so they almost become the guarantors for it in a way.
The federal government becomes the banker. They'll loan you money for 6 months because they know it's an even longer time frame for your products to make it halfway across the world and then get paid. So it really supports the export. I'll send you a link to it.
Hey, that would be great. Yeah, we're just on the verge of doing significant amount more volume in UK.
Yes.
And it's okay when it's smaller, or it's not okay when it's smaller. Every single dollar matters, but there's a lot greater risk when those orders become a lot bigger. Mate, that would be great.
I think it's a terrific initiative by the federal government to really get export going, particularly after what's going on with China, trying to broaden our export base into Europe and elsewhere around the world. I think it's terrific.
It just from the sound of it, just removes a lot of those risks.
Can you outline the most stressful point in your small business growth journey so our audience can learn from it?
The most stressful point. I suppose just recently we've just, outside of COVID, everyone grew a few new grey hairs that they didn't have before.
Yep.
But in particular for us was getting our DA through council, I would say. It has been prolonged so much. So there was every challenge that got thrown our way, it did. And it was to the point we were actually unsure whether it was going to go through. And what that meant was potentially we may have had to look to move off farm or split the sites for our distillery. So it's not really a council challenge as such. They were just under the pump.
Yeah.
But that was probably and that's been over the last 12 months. So we're actually submitting construction certificate this week, which is great. But now we've got now we've got that room to grow the business, which is, that was quite a stressful point about what the future of the business may look like. So I slept a bit easier when the PA approvals came through.
What area in business do you feel you've had to work on the most to add the greatest value?
For the greatest value, I'd say building a team. We, again, from the start, it's been very much, our values are quite strong and quite open and pronounced, and we attract a lot of people that have shared values, which is great from the onset. But that time as we've grown, as we've grown the business, it's important to, for us to take that time and energy to develop the teams themselves. So that's been really not the biggest challenge, but I think the thing we've worked, like you said, worked on the most, and that's takes a lot, probably more time than maybe what you think initially. And as teams grow, people are doing great, we're all doing good and wonderful things, and then you get to these sort of tipping points, and it's like, hang on, whoa, we have not been giving the time it needs and the level of investment internally within the business, internally within certain teams. So, taking check of those.
What have you enjoyed least about managing the fast growth?
Probably cash flow, the cash flow woes that go with it. I'm sure a lot of people would probably speak to that. That's probably been the biggest challenge, in particular with us self-funding. When and where, there's some really challenging points in terms of, geez, are we going to be able to finance this next piece? Or, if our sales aren't meeting what we wanted on a budget and our cash flow is dripping out the back end, there's been some definite challenges through there, but also with those challenges becomes learning. We've become a lot better at managing our cash flow and, forecasting and whatnot around that. So, I'd like to think we're getting better at it.
What do you love most about growing a small business?
I think it's a sense of accomplishment for me. I talked before about probably what was a moment of success. I get a lot of, I'm quite an emotional character, I think, and I get a lot of sense of pride on many occasions. But I think I get such a sense of accomplishment when I see the team and what they've done and what they achieve. It's a big change going, especially, as a co-founder, it's very much, all right, yep, great. You're doing the work, you're setting the direction, you're doing the jobs, you're running your still, you're doing all of this stuff. And it gets to that point where, you have to you have to build your team and give them that autonomy to get those results. And I think I get such a sense of pride and accomplishment to see the team succeed.
What's been the biggest mindset shift for you in your small business growth journey?
For me, it's probably moving away from that fly by the seat of our pants feel to, okay, we need to set some more structure into this. Now, I think fly by to the seat of your pants, you never really want to, I don't think you actually ever lose that. Well, and I think there's a lot of great things within that, the fact that, there's being a mobile business and elastic business, you can move quite quickly. But that's been a big change, I think, from going from early stages. And I look along the way, at these points, we've had to bring in a lot more structure to the business. For instance, our values, our behaviors, redefining those and building measures internally around those. From accounting and cash flow, building greater measures and greater transparency and forecasting pieces into that. And, even from where we're heading, we're growing at a very fast pace, but we also need to have a good, strong direction and accountability framework. So about a year and a half to 2 years ago, we brought in a new measure of framework, which is called Objectives and Key Results, or OKRs. And
yeah, that was created by 2 ex-Google employees, I think, the OKR movement.
Yep. Yeah. And it's a brilliant book. It's a bit dry from times, but what it came down to is, in a super fast growing business, how do you kind of, fuel that growth, but also transparently keeping the business together and everyone moving together in the same direction.
Yep.
So for us, it's been a really great, transparent goal setting and setting those stretch goal targets for our business. It's okay. Hey, if we wanted to be selling 22, what about it? What does, if we wanted to sell 26,000 cases look like? What would we have to do to stretch ourselves to get to that?
Yep.
Or whiskey barrels, right? If we wanted to do 100 whiskey barrels, for the quarter, what does 120 look like? What would we have to do? And it's a good stretch for the team, and it's really owned by the team. So that's been something that's been a really, I suppose, a really good tool or framework for us.
What's the number one habit you think a small business owner needs to develop and maintain?
Understand your cash flow and your numbers, I would say. You cannot do it early enough, and use some good tools. We use Xero, and Xero's such an incredible system. But understand, if you don't have that skill set to understand, get yourself a good practical accountant. And there's also some other really good tools. We've just stumbled upon and just onboarded one called Calxa, and that's purely around cash flow forecasting. So I highly recommend. Understand, get close, get intimate with your numbers and understand your cash positions.
Yeah, absolutely.
Be the change you want to see in your business. Become more productive and less stressed with our free Transform Your Performance online course. Once you see the benefits, put your entire team through the course at no cost. We start out by telling you the secret to guaranteed success, then over 100 lessons help you be more focused, present, productive, and feel more in control about work. growasmallbusiness.com.
And can you talk to how you've added people to the team, some wins, mistakes, and advice for those listening?
For sure. So I've sort of mentioned a couple of times in the chat, culture for us is so important, and we see ourselves as quite a value-driven and values-driven business. So for us, whenever we bring someone onto the team, it's always important to be purely values and culture first. Now, that's been good, but it's also, as our business grows, that's been how much of that we take in, because we're at the point now where we're bringing in much more skilled people into our business. But in that, you can kind of get blindsided by saying, hey, this person's got such a great skill set, but if they don't connect with you as a business from your culture and values perspective, it's not going to work.
Yep.
Or vice versa. You go, oh, great, they're so aligned with our culture and values, but hey, actually, we needed to hire someone in for strategic accounting, and they love the rainforest environment, but they can't do that. So I think it's really finding that balance, and that's something we're working on at the moment as we're needing to bring in some more highly skilled people into the team.
What are some things you recommend to building a sustainable and kick-ass culture to help with the growth?
I'd say establishing and defining your values and purpose, and having that clear. For us at the start, we were relatively clear on that, but we just went through a period, and this is something actually I had Jamie, one of the co-founders of Stone and Wood, came in and assisted us with. And you look at a values-driven business that prides himself on connection to community and culture. Stone and Wood, in my mind, just typifies that.
Yes.
So we went through a process, and it's been about the last 8 months of redefining our values and being really clear that we can communicate through the business. But then the behaviors, if you look at, say, an iceberg, the behaviors are just what sits above the top. So it's how people act and whatnot. And those behaviors essentially stem from those values. So bringing in a management or a measurement framework around that, and it's sort of simple stuff, but it's been a real big benefit to the business. So, and I suppose the last thing, and maybe it gets, well, I don't think it gets overlooked, but the importance of rituals as a team, be it if you do a handball competition on a Friday afternoon as a team, or, for us in Byron, without ticking too many stereotypes, we go for every month in February, we do this thing called Surf February.
I was going to say surfing, yeah, of course.
Which is great. We have a different type of board meeting in Byron Bay. But those small rituals, even if it's that barbecue you do on a fortnight, or the team getting together for a drink, as long as it doesn't go, off crazy.
Yeah.
But those small rituals are so important, and to spend time on making sure that they continue, or you create new rituals. I think that's a really important thing.
Tell our audience how you've handled balance.
Okay, I probably have tend to put work ahead of life, and in a lot of times my fiance will attest to that. But for me, always knowing when you need to have that balance in place. So I've become a lot better in that, and really keeping time for time for activity. For me, my switch off is I'll go for a surf, or if I ever get the chance, I go and play some golf. And having those things of just being able to completely switch off are so important, because those switch off points give you more clarity when you come back in, and they will help you get better and better. And if you just constantly work with your blinkers on, you'll miss everything, all the great stuff around you. So working on that, I'm working on myself more sort of management skill set and sort of CEO workshops at the moment, which is going great. And to build that into the team, it's if you work smarter, it is such a great outcome, and you will create so much more time to work on all the projects, all the tasks that you want to really sink your teeth into.
That's the next question. How much professional development you've invested in yourself over the last 4.5 years in particular?
Yeah, so for the last 3.5 years, I'd say close to zero.
Right.
But look, very fortunate of with the business community around. Firstly, we run our business as a family board. We run both businesses, quite closely. So in terms of my brother, he's the CEO, Will, of Brook Farm, and to have a relationship like that where I can call up and we can just have those conversations. And part of the time you're not even having conversation, you're just talking through things, and you make that clarity,
Yes.
sense of clarity in your own head. But to have people in the community that you can talk to is great. So I'm always been able, and I could not probably give much more advice. My best piece of advice is networking and put the time into building great relationships. And relationships are never one-sided. You can't just meet someone and expect something from them. You've got to put that work in.
Yep.
So I've been lucky enough, or not lucky, I've worked on building some great relationships from business people in our region that I can have those conversations with. But through the Entrepreneurs Program run by the state government and really spearheaded here in Northern Rivers, they've actually created a CEO workshop. So they've selected a bunch of CEOs in this region, and we're doing a 12-month workshop of one chunk every month. We've been doing a piece on coaching at the moment, which is great. So that's been a really positive thing to work on. But I would highly recommend build that business network community and put time and energy into those relationships.
And what about mentors or coaches? You've mentioned Jim. Anyone else? And your brother Will? Any other mentors or coaches?
Yeah, I haven't had, say, a formal mentor relationship, but I've been very fortunate to have some great people I would consider mentors. In particular, my both Pam and Martin, my parents, with what they've done with creating Brook Farm, and to have those people that you can I've learned so much from, and how they go about doing business, and what is important in that process of doing business, and again going back to those values and how we run our businesses. A dear friend now by the name of Tony Stubley, so he was one of the co-founders of South Trade, and I learned so much from him, and he kind of took me under his wing a bit, and I wouldn't be here where I am today without having that learning experience of understanding how the whole world of the spirit industry works. And so that was incredible. And I still, he lives here now in Byron Bay, and, we catch up, and it's just such a great relationship to continue. But probably the most from the business at the moment is Jim. And
Yep.
And from that mentor relationship, when I talk about how Jim sees spirits as much more than just a product or a liquid in the bottle, that purpose and how important it is what we do, how important what we do is, from making a spirit and that importance of those tasks and that sense of pride to take in our work, that has been such a great learning he passes on. And, when he talks about Scotch whiskey, he talks about it, and he's a bloody emotional guy, and it's pretty serious. He talks about it like, this is the blood of Scotland. You've got that blood of Scotland in your hands.
Yes.
And you mention it like that, and you talk about it, and people go, wow.
Yeah.
And people take on such a greater sense of responsibility. So, but no, just an incredible human, but an incredible mentor to have.
And your board of directors or advisors at the moment, is that or just all family members? And I guess Jim sits on that as well, or you got independents on there?
Yeah, so we run just as a family board at the moment. It's something we are looking at bringing in external, having external, and that's part of how we run our businesses, and especially where Will and I are taking both businesses. For us, it's quite different. When Mum and Dad started Brook Farm, it was just the two of them. They've grown it to, I think revenue sitting at about $19 million a year, and just incredible how they've grown that business.
Sorry, did you say 90 or 19?
19.
Yeah,
19.
19. Yeah, great. That's still phenomenal.
It's still incredible, and that's without going into Coles and Woolworths, the biggest retailers in Australia, so
it's amazing. And Pam mentioned that in the cast. Yeah, the family decided not to go down that path. Yeah.
Very early on. And with that in mind, you look about people would say, oh no, the opportunities are too small within certain things and they're too limiting. There is so much opportunity. You've just got to force yourself to look under the rocks and not be daunted by these sort of people giving you advice that, oh, it's too great a thing to achieve. It's everything's possible. And I think that tested to that.
Tell them to shut the fuck up and just get on with
it. I think people that haven't done things are the first to give you advice.
Yes, that's right. You're pretty much following in your father's footsteps, aren't you? Because he go around driving everywhere and hand selling early on all the Brook Farm products?
Very, very much so. From the early days when Mum was, still a full-time dentist.
Yes,
we were making muesli outside, and Dad, outside of us selling it at the family on the markets, Dad would literally drive around the region, hand selling it out of the back of his car. And that is exactly how we started. We talked about this to the family. I remember our first customer was Leah at the Bangalow Cellars. And I drove around. I was ecstatic. We invited her to the opening, but hand delivering then. And we actually very early on, before, I think it was in the week leading up to Christmas in 2016. It was a beautiful moment, but Dad and I did just a day trip to Ballina and we did the same thing, hand selling in. So it was really quite a beautiful sort of generational
it's a
moment.
Great tradition.
Yeah, you got it from the ground up. You can't, I think if people think that you get to skip that, look, don't get me wrong. There's probably so many businesses that can now in the tech age, which is great. But I think from a product such as ours, it's such a powerful tool to come from the ground up.
Right, Eddie, one of our final 5 questions. What do you think is the hardest thing in growing a small business?
Being comfortable with evolution and knowing when that you've got to do things better, and always being comfortable to work on those new strategies and cash flow.
Yeah,
got to be in there.
Favorite business book which has helped you the most?
I really enjoyed and did a lot of work and read it so many times, but Why by Simon Sinek when I started early on, but also the OKR framework book, which has just skipped my mind at the moment, but
we'll be able to find it and link through to it in the show notes. I mean, that Simon Sinek, that started with his TED talk, and it's in the top 10 most watched TED talks on the planet. That one.
It is. And for us, where we knew we're so purpose and value driven, for me, that was just, you have a few things, and there's so many great, I've listened to so many different podcasts and speakers and read so many books, but there's certain things that, you know, from different people that really just hit that chord with you. So, and Simon's that really purpose-driven perspective really, you know, connected with me.
Any great podcasts or online learning tools you use for your own professional development?
For me at the moment, I've been listening to a fair bit of the Evergreen podcast. And Evergreen is kind of this business community, which is all about very, very sustainable business and sustainable business growth. And Jamie from Stonewood got me onto those. So yeah, they're quite a good tool about, you know, continued sustainable growth in business. You know, these businesses, 30, 40% year on year for 20 years, you know, that is what an achievement. And that's some stuff, I get some really great learnings from those.
One tool you'd recommend to help grow a small business?
I'd recommend the OKR framework, and for people to have a look at it, even though they might think it's a pretty structured framework, you can pick apart and use it as you would. So I'd recommend for people to have that, and it's just a really great goal setting and directional framework.
Yeah, we use it in one of the companies I still own a bit in London, which is great. Finally, my favorite question: what would you tell yourself on day one of starting out?
Don't listen to the naysayers. They'll always be there. And I think to do that is to back yourself. But to back yourself, but put your vision and your direction down on paper too, because if you've got that direction, that strategy, and you've put that down for a reason, you know, you've got to then trust in yourself to achieve that.
Fantastic, Eddie. Thank you so much for your time today and sharing your journey with us. The last 4.5 years, phenomenal growth from 1 FTE plus your dog up to around 30 now, and getting not only a great mentor, but business person and distilling legend in Jim McEwen. And congratulations to you, Jim, and the rest of the team for your growth so far. And look forward to hearing more about it in the next chapter, and then having you back on maybe in a year or two.
Absolutely. Look forward to it. No, thanks for having me.
And for our audience, we would greatly appreciate a review in iTunes or whatever platform you listen to us on. More reviews means we bubble up higher in iTunes, etc. So more business owners looking for podcast help with their growth will find us.